My mother was a pianist, and when she used to play, we used to look at her. After that, she would recite poetry for us. We will also look at her, and she used to tell us, "Don't look at me. Close your eyes and listen to music, listen to poetry." And that helped me a lot, Helped me a lot because closing your eyes and listening to music, closing your eyes and listening to poetry helps you in a big way, because you can encounter images, your own images, images that have not been inherited, that have not been borrowed by anyone, from anyone.
There was a man striking our consciousness, questioning our morality over the last 5 decades through his distinctive style of filmmaking. Whenever I hear the term pure cinema, one of the first names that comes to mind is Buddhadeb Dasgupta. His films are conceived in spellbinding images and sounds, something Bengali film industry is oblivious about and often finds absurd and irrelevant. To grasp the essence of his films, you have to liberate yourself from the conventional narrative structures. In 1925, when art critic Franz Roh applied the term magic realism to visual art, he was designating a style of visual art that brings extreme realism to the depiction of mundane subject matter, revealing an interior mystery rather than imposing external overlay magical features onto this everyday reality. Roh explains, "We are offered a new style that is thoroughly of this world, that celebrates the mundane. This new world of objects is still alien to the current idea of realism. It employs various techniques that endow all things with a deeper meaning and reveal mysteries that always threaten the secure tranquility of simple and ingenious things. It is a question of representing before our eyes, in an intuitive way, the fact, the interior figure of the exterior world." This technique of modern art made an impression on Dasgupta and inspired him to enunciate his messages through cinema. His experiments with magic realism commenced with The Red Door, and then slowly but surely made its access wider and deeper with The Wrestlers, came back to a slightly more cohesive narrative with A Tale of a Naughty Girl, where visual poetry and the metaphors proliferated. Chased by Dreams, The Voyeurs, Memories of Mist, and The Window made generous use of visual poetry, allegory, and magic elements. In his latest ventures like The Sniffer, Bait, and The Flight, the use of more surrealistic elements can be seen. From Distance in 1978 with Roh's extreme realism to Bait in 2017 with a more surrealistic approach, Dasgupta has ventured every facet of magic realism and has created his own brand, what he prefers to call extended realism. He has been toying relentlessly with surrealistic magic, with visual poetry as cinematic metaphors and with a collage of characters, incidents, and interactions that are not necessarily connected and may not add up to a cohesive or symmetrical whole. And in a desperate attempt to connect these narrative dots, we overlook the quintessential crux of the film. Mexican critic Louis Leal summed up the difficulty of defining magical realism by writing, "If you can explain it, then it's not magical realism." He offers his own explanation. Without thinking of the concept of magical realism, each writer gives expression to a reality he observes in the people. To me, magical realism is an attitude on the part of the characters in the novel towards the world or towards nature. And I think Leal's take on magic realism at least has given us a lens to look at characters like Raja and Goja and their uncanny characteristics from Bait, or the army of dwarfs from The Wrestlers traversing mountains, plains, and rivers. To unfold the enigma of any artwork, it is important to know the political backdrop. The flurried time of the 70s with the Naxalbari movement invaded Dasgupta's consciousness and spawned forthright political films such as The Distance, Bitter Morsel, and The Civil War. The atmosphere and its repercussions demanded a very volatile treatment of the films. Hence, a very distinctive style emerged in that era. And sure enough, the shadow of sense works can be felt in Dasgupta's rudimentary films until he dived deep into magic realism. One might argue that over the years his political stances quelled, but in reality, Dasgupta was busy defining greater forces that transfer human consciousness that in turn affect the politics as a result of its domino effect. Series of events in 1998 and 1999 gave rise to a politically charged yet poetic film Uttara, or The Wrestlers, in 2000. The film had been made astutely with a veil of globalization versus localization conflict, and this vivid range of interpretations makes it a timeless classic. The film is about the bond between two friends, Bolaram and Nimai. They work as station guards in a remote rural village in Birbhum and share a strong bond of friendship that is strengthened by their love for wrestling. In the same village, there also lives a missionary whom everyone calls Padre Babu. The missionary has adopted a boy orphaned at a young age and raises him up, calling him Matthew. Into this peaceful world enters three very undesirable characters whose arrival spreads strange unease as they roam around this village in their jeep, watched by the distrustful eyes of the villagers. In the meantime, Bolaram gets a telegram from his aunt, goes to visit her in another distant village, and returns with a wife in tow, Uttara. The bond that existed between Bolaram and Nimai starts to develop cracks as the one between Bolaram and Uttara grows. Bolaram and Nimai still wrestle with each other, but with a ferocious intensity that was missing before. Finally, when Nimai tries to claim Uttara, they start to wrestle till death. At the same time, the three goons attack the church. While Matthew escapes, the padre is caught and tied to a pole and set to fire. Uttara, seeing the attack, tries to get Bolaram and Nimai to help, but they keep on wrestling. A dwarf tries to help Uttara, but he loses his life in his attempt. The movie ends on a violent note. The creations of magic realism are always based on a palpable reality. The Wrestlers is no different. In 1999, a man named Dara Singh, driven by religious fundamentalism, led a mob and set fire to the station wagon in which the Australian Christian missionary Graham Staines and his two children were sleeping, which burned them alive at Orissa. Like the fundamentalists of the Wrestlers, Singh was not always a part of Orissa. He came from Uttar Pradesh. Dasgupta obviously alludes to the event, but his approach is not that of an inquiry commission trying to determine responsibility or the trace of the origin of an event. His approach is poetic, that permits him to lift the events above the level of their occurrence, look at them with compassion, and react to them in a profound human way. Inquiry is required, but the conclusion must be complemented through poetry. For without poetry, the events alluded to can only exacerbate the wounds they already inflicted to the social body and psyche. The way the movie depicts the development of the plot conveys this violation of a peaceful world. The series of disjunctive shots of the various threads of the story that follow the opening utopic shot disrupt any notions of linearity, making the audience feel the conflict of the various forces that destroys the village. One of these scenes show an army of dwarfs traversing mountains, plains and rivers, suggesting the search for an alternative world. As the dwarfs who tries to help Uttara explains,
লম্বা মানুষ তো দেখলে এতকাল কিছু করতে পারলো তারা পৃথিবীটা বদলালো খালি যুদ্ধ যুদ্ধ আর যুদ্ধ
these people have grown weary of the world of tall people, which is full of cruelty and despair, and seek of an alternative world. Even though the ever-present darkness manages to affect the world of the dwarfs, the hope that configures the escape of Matthew is assisted by the recurring scene of a troupe of folk dancers who meander through the various parts of the village as well as the various narratives. Wearing masks of animals and dancing to a song that reinforces the themes of the movie, these dancers function within a mythic framework representing the continuity of culture and tradition and act as a stabilizing force in the various conflicts that mar the idyllic world of the village. The indigenous roots of the traveling dancing troupe and the performance creates an allegory of the shift of power between indigenous and the invaders. The sport of wrestling is a performance in the Indian tradition. The increasing ferociousness of the two participants create another uncomfortable power struggle. The plot uses an age-old situation of one woman, two men, but connects it with the outer violence as the inner violence breaks out between the two friends. The use of different motifs, allusions, rhetorical devices to pacify the complete rupture of the previously shown dreamy harmony to a burning, choking devastation, Dasgupta's cinema veils it in a mystified folkloric tradition.